Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Herbalism segment of the Elder Tree podcast. I am your host, Tennille Christensen from Earth Mama, where I teach people how to thrive and get skilled for sustainability. As an educator, kitchen witch, and plant lover, I welcome you to tune in as I interview permaculturists from around the world. We will learn holistic ways of integrating plants into our homes, gardens, and communities for healing. Together, we will explore the art and science of this regenerative design system and harvest the collective wisdom. Permaculture offers a pathway to empower people to develop their lifestyles and landscapes. So let's discover how to grow and know plants with a purpose.
This country that we call Australia is an intricate network of song lines, and people have walked across, back and forth across the entire continent, singing their knowledge into the landscape for thousands and thousands of years. And it's way more than just a tokenistic or symbolic thing. It's actually embedding knowledge into the landscape. People would be across the road from our house singing into the night, and it was like ceremonial song. There'd be songmen singing these ancient songs for ceremony, or there'd be a funeral and people would sing, and that people were always singing, and it wasn't in a performative way, but it was in this just deeply embedded way that is actually that's what keeps culture going. Our brains are literally wired to recognize patterns and remember them rather than data and text, which is sort of what our entire Western education system is based on. So I was like, well, screw that. I'm just going to write some songs, and hopefully it helps me to remember the permaculture principles, and it might help some other people do it too.
Charlie Mgee is a songwriter, ukulele player, and permaculturist who founded the world-renowned ecological funk swing band Formidable Vegetable. In this interview, he tells us about his childhood growing up in Arnhem Land and how living with Indigenous communities taught him about song as pattern language and the powerful way music was shared in the traditional way of knowing and remembering to propagate culture. This conversation explores his career as a musician, how he came to use it as a tool for education, and how he believes that real change is going to happen at a community level with local and bioregional scaled solutions. We touch on topics such as diversity in our landscapes and gut microbiome, the soil food web, and how he stays healthy on tour with some special medicinal plants. I have been his groupie for the last fortnight, following him around North Queensland with all of his shows, and listening to his new music from Microbiome. So, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me.
Fortnight? Hey, Tennille, I think we met about 10 years ago at my very first gig when you were running a permaculture workshop at a festival in far North Queensland. So I think it's been longer than a fortnight, but thanks for... Thanks for acknowledging that.
I'm a long-term groupie, totally. But, when you're here, I'm definitely going to follow you around and listen, dance, boogie to all of your awesome tunes. Yay. So I know that you're kind of all over the permaculture scene, but for our listeners who somehow may have never heard of you, they're a little bit late. We're going to get them up to scratch. Can you share why permaculture is so important to you?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that it's pretty much my entire reason for being, I know that sounds a little bit culty. Permaculture is not a cult, people. It's not a permacult. It's a way of seeing the world that is kind of moving beyond this linear, narrow-minded, blinkered outlook of life. And for me, I did a permaculture course back in 2011, and I thought I was going to go learn about gardening and farming and growing food. And of course, that stuff all came into it. But what I came out with was this broader understanding of the way systems work in nature and how we can help design systems that work with those natural systems. So it's a way of using patterns found in nature to try and to work with nature rather than against it. And I came out of this course realizing that it was about way more than just plants and way more than just gardening, and that it was really something that I could apply to my life as it was, which was as a touring musician to kind of enrich what I was already doing and also help the world as well. So I was actually touring around in bands prior to 2011, playing drums and, you know, doing gigs up and down the West Coast in WA where I'm from. And it was heaps of fun, and, you know, we'd be playing a show every night and having a great time, and people would come out and dance, and it was all well and good, but I just had this sense that the world needed some help, and I wanted to do something to help, and I started, you know, kind of waking up to these issues of the climate and the ecological crisis and all of these things that you know, were slowly trickling in. And I was like, hang on, like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just playing music to people who are coming out, having a good time, and then falling over and probably forgetting that they even went out last night. And I really wanted to do something a bit more meaningful. So that's why I kind of threw it aside and went off to study permaculture. And I thought, right, I'm going to do something practical. I'm going to learn how to grow food and make compost and feed people, because that's going to be a skill that'll be useful in this world that we're moving into. And ironically, I came out of the course writing songs about permaculture. So I was just like thrust straight back into my previous job as a musician, but with this new direction. And we created the band Formidable Vegetable, previously Formidable Vegetable Sound System, but who needs 10 syllables in their band name? And then kind of accidentally got launched onto a 10-year world tour all over the world, and playing at festivals and events in over 20 countries, from you know, permaculture related things to completely random dance music, doof festivals, and kids festivals and schools and farmers markets and the rest. So it's been a bit of a blur, but that's the long story short.
Yes, awesome. What came to me then was, you know, like how permaculture it becomes this lens when you step out of doing your permaculture training. And, you know, it's just so amazing that it can be applied to anybody and their history and their story. And I just spoke with Brenna Quinlan, and, you know, she studied art. You know Brenna quite well, don't you?
I've
she
met her a
studied
couple
art.
of times.
A couple of times. And then that became, when she learnt permaculture, that became her expression, and she's filled this niche and brought this powerful message of articulating illustrations in permaculture to the world. And you've done it with music. You're both such creative, dynamic people. And just to like reverse back to the beginning of my permaculture journey, was back in Townsville, and I was having this conversation with, you know, at the community garden, and I was saying, wouldn't it be amazing if somebody could sing about the permaculture principles? That would be so valuable to get everyone to understand, and do it in a way that was entertaining, and, you know, like the power of everyone singing along. And
it was you! You manifested this! That's why I'm here!
Nothing to do with your past and your talent. It was all my wish. But somebody who was in that conversation messaged me and said, hey, check out this guy. He's doing crowdfunding, and he's doing this you know, writing songs about the permaculture principles. And so I think, you know, I was like, yes, here, have my money, create this, go for it. This is awesome. And you know, I just want to touch on that because it's a big part. You know, you have a Patreon, and it's a way that people can really support you and your music, as well as, you know, buying your CDs and all of that kind of thing. But, you know, then we met at that festival when I think I was doing seed balls or making kimchi or something, and you came and sat down and started playing your ukulele, and I turned around and I'm like, oh my God, you're that guy. I've been following you. So that was a really, really special and momentum, like a special time in my life. And I encourage people to, you know, to throw money in at creative people like you, so that you can launch into creating your art and, you know, bringing this really important, you know, message to the world. And that's my tangent. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I remember that, and that was incredible because I at that stage I hadn't even performed the songs to anybody. Like, that was prior to my first gig. And the thing about permaculture is, you know, without getting too sort of esoteric, is I think it puts us where we need to be. And once you start recognizing the patterns in nature and these living by these ethics and principles and trying to kind of align yourself with them, I found, even in some mysterious ways, things start to flow. And that was a really significant moment, that whole time in far north Queensland, because not only did I come to a festival in a place that I'd never been to before, and then I sat down next to you making seed balls who happened to have heard about the project I was doing. You're like, hey, wait, you're that guy. And I'm like, what? Someone's heard of me? Like, what the hell? But straight after that, I went up to the Solar Eclipse Festival, which was on at the time, and that was, way bigger and had about, tens of thousands of people coming. And by freak accident or coincidence or whatever you want to call it, the band that I'd actually been booked to play with didn't show up on the night we were supposed to play. And there was a mix-up in the programming, and they were coming the next night, but we were told we were playing on the opening night on the main stage, and the organisers came and said, what are we going to do? The band's not here. What's going to happen? And I said, well, I've got a ukulele and some songs about permaculture. I can do that. And he said, yep, great, just do that and tell them the band's coming tomorrow night. So Formidable Vegetable had their first massive gig straight after that little festival that we met at on the main stage on the opening night of an international mega dance music festival. And I was just like, oh my God, how the hell do I cater for an audience that likes dance music? All I've got is a ukulele and some daggy songs, or at least I thought they were daggy at the time, about growing things and designing things. And so I had 4 days to get together some electronic beats with a friend who produced electronic music, and then cobble together a band of ragamuffins from the festival that I found on the day to then jump on stage at 8 o'clock at night and play to a few thousand people without ever having performed them before. So, it was pretty amazing. And after that, like I mentioned, we got invited to play at Glastonbury and at Shambhala in Canada and in Burning Man and all these like huge international festivals. And that was sort of the next few years. But for me, again, it all stemmed from aligning what I was already doing with the ethics and principles of permaculture, which are based on, the intelligence of nature. And so it was really interesting just to kind of make that correlation, not saying correlation is causation, but who knows?
Yep. And I think it's really cool how you've been on these massive big stages, and I was there in the crowd. That was on Earth Stage, and I was working in the whatever cafe right beside it, and I listened, and it was amazing. And then to see you launch and then create these albums, and then today, on Saturday night, you're doing this gig for the local energy trading system where, the Tablelands community is coming together. And today you did the homeschool group for the Tablelands with 40 children. So you really bring your music and make it accessible to everybody. And yeah, why do you do that? Like, why do you not just do the big stages? Why is it important for you to go to these communities and to really spread your messages there?
Look, community is everything, and I've kind of tried to walk the line of trying to do the bigger, better gigs, like the classic rock band kind of model of touring, but it's never sat well with me. And to be honest, some of our best gigs, we've played massive stages in front of tens of thousands of people, and it's amazing, and it's a pretty incredible feeling to be playing to that many people. But there's just something that comes from playing to a small community of, 50, 100, 150 people that just means that you connect on a really on a deeper level, and you can see people's faces. You might know a few people, and they definitely know each other. And when you work in those spaces, there's just this energy that you can't really replicate on a huge level. And that's a paradox of I guess things like permaculture and creating change in the world, is that nowadays we're bombarded with these huge problems, these global challenges that we have to solve, and someone's got to come and save the world. We have this savior mentality flying around left, right, and center, and you've got these billionaires who are throwing money to philanthropic funds of like tens of millions of dollars, And it's all this bigger, better, faster, stronger kind of way of thinking. But I've always felt like the real change is happening and going to continue to happen at a community level. And yes, we've got these huge problems in the world and we've got to solve them, for the sake of our species and every other species on the planet. But we have to do it in a way that's bioregional, so local and community scale. Like it's got to be accessible for anyone. It can't be these highfalutin philanthropists or these, Einsteinian scientists. Like, of course they have their place, but we've got to all be able to be in it together. And permaculture is obviously not just a way to design or, work with plants and animals and natural systems, but it's also a global movement. And that's been part of the reason that we can tour the world. Back when I was flying internationally, we go to any country, and the way I'd book a tour, apart, after getting invited to some festival or big event, I'd be like, right, what else is going on here? I just searched the word permaculture and that town or city where I was, and I would instantly tap in to a huge network of people who were doing the exact same thing in some way that I was, and they got it, and they were connected to a wider community, and they were connected to other people that were doing other things that were sort of aligned. And so it really gave me this sense that there's this network that is global, but it's also intensely local. And I think we have to hold those two things. We have to see beyond just the global. It goes back to that classic, think global, act local. Like the act local is the key.
Yeah.
If we think globally and act globally, it's probably just as disastrous as causing the problems that we've already caused. In fact, I'd say most of the problems were caused with that thinking. So, yeah, it's community is just where it's at, and doing shows up here. I'm currently in Koa in far north Queensland, and just doing shows at a local hall to homeschool kids or their parents or just a local crowd of people who are doing permaculture just really feels like the juice,
Yes, awesome. Yeah, and some really beautiful memories that come up from you sharing about, the working locally is you rocking up to my first introduction to permaculture course that I ever taught at the Bungalow Community Gardens down in in Cairns. Yeah, you just showed up and played music to our students. So it's like, wow, this guy is just like so supportive of the movement. And yeah, the ripple effects are amazing. Another memory is was a Golf Kids Day where I rocked up to make herb spirals in Croydon and Georgetown with the real communities, and you rock up with all this trash from the dump and create this whole musical experience for the children. It's like you have so much range and dedication to permaculture and getting the message out and inspiring children in a really fun and creative way, that I think reaches a lot of hearts and makes the problems of the world, it overlays a level of like positivity and creativity and inspiration. We learn the solutions when we go to the courses and we learn as adults, and I'm working with children in my courses, but without having to show up to a permaculture course, people, like, you're infiltrating through the sound waves, inspiring so many more people on a deeper level. So thank you.
Oh, pleasure.
All right. So in terms of herbalism and plants, how do you integrate plants specifically from that sort of healing health perspective into your life?
Well, I mean, touring a lot of the time, you're pretty exposed to a lot of everything, and I struggled a lot for the first couple of years. It was so intense, and I was touring North America and then Europe and then India, and then I'd be flying to another country every weekend, and it really hammers your system. And I found the herb andrographis was just like a savior. It's just like this king of bitters, they call it, and I'm pretty sure it's a tropical herb, but I would always carry my bit of andrographis with me and just kind of boost my immune system. And it didn't work every time, but I feel like it saved me from certain death at a lot of times, and so I've kind of just kept that up for about 10 years. I actually found some growing at a friend's place down in Mgee a few years ago, and I was like, oh, that's what the plant looks like. I've only ever had it in powdered form, but I tried it, and man, it's earned its name, like king of bitters. It is the most bitter stuff I've ever tasted, and I had one leaf, and I was like, ugh, ugh, and my mouth was just like, I couldn't deal for like an hour. I was like, how do I get this taste out of my mouth? But man, something that bitter has got to be good for you, I tell you what. So, yeah, I mean, that's one that I love, and kind of, it's just like a mainstay in my daily routine. But, there's everywhere I go, there's something else. Like I love learning about new herbs and new plants in different countries and different bioregions. Like when I was in India, there was some amazing stuff, and people there, a lot of people who go to India get sick and get, stomach parasites or any number of kind of gastrointestinal things. But the crew that I was hanging out with were eating or blending up papaya leaves and just drinking that as a shot every morning. And again, most disgusting thing you'll ever taste, but it worked, and I was doing that. And I think I might be the only person ever to go to India and not come back with a stomach bug. So yeah, there was stuff like that in Hawaii. Friends were doing shots of noni fruit, and again, most disgusting. Why are these herbs all so disgusting? Like, can't they be sort of tasty so that we actually want to eat them? Or you just like, it's like a gauntlet you got to run through. It's like, right, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to get through this.
Yes, I was pondering that with my daughter, and the conclusion I came to was if it actually tasted really good, we would probably overindulge and the medicine would just be too strong. So, yeah, but good question, because they're all pretty potent.
Yeah, good point. I mean, they're obviously pretty powerful. Like, you wouldn't want to eat too much of anything, and so that's a good point. But oh man, noni fruit. Oh, geez, my feet smell better than that on a bad day.
We had a friend turn up one day, and he had fermented. It was like this fermented gooey juice that had like this blue tinge to it, and he was like, "It's good for you. Let's drink it." And I'm like, "No, I can't do it."
Someone told me the other day that it never goes off, and I believe them. They're like, it's impossible to rot because, and then their theory was that it's already rotten. Like, it's already so rotten, you can't actually get more rotten than that. But something in it, like if you've ever had a shot of noni, it's like eating a chili. It's like spicy, and it sets your mouth on fire, whilst also somehow tasting like stinky cheese. But it's a real pick-me-up. It's just like, whoa, okay, that's doing something.
I'm alive.
And yes, yeah, I harvested a whole load of it on Magnetic Island a few years ago. It was just growing wild down at the beach, and I'm pretty sure there's a native one that grows in Australia, but it's a bit smaller than the other one. I don't know which one this was, but it was definitely noni, and we grabbed it and we just filled a jar. And I just watched as these green fruits slowly liquefied into this black syrup over the next few months. And a friend had told me, "Oh, make sure you leave it for at least 6 months." I was like, "Really?" So we left it on the back doorstep all through winter, and it just kept going and going and going until the fruit was just unrecognizable. It was just this black goo. And then, sure enough, winter comes around. It's like flu season. We're like, well, time to crack out the noni, and we just like pour this black goo into a shot glass, and down she goes. Whew,
you did it.
It did the job. Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're so brave. So you've really taken herbalism, you're like drawing on the herbs or the medicinal plants from all the different places that you visit.
It was one of the things that got me into permaculture. I remember reading Isabel Shippard's How to Use Herbs in My Daily Life. And that was one of the things that inspired me to do permaculture. It was just like learning about plants and what they could do and all of these obscure things that I'd never heard of, like comfrey. I'm like, what is this comfrey? And it turns out it can knit your bones back together. I'm like, what? And, just learning how to grow them. I think, I love the thing that she says in her book is like, to know them is to grow them, and to grow them is to love them, or something. It's like, that was the stepping stone to building a connection with with the beyond human world. I think plants are just a gateway to that thinking beyond ourselves, and it's a beautiful one because, like, plants are everywhere. Like, the world is mostly plants, and if we can kind of connect with that on a deeper level than just like, oh, what are you good for? I'll pick you and eat you. It's like, no, actually, like, what do you need? Where do you grow? What do you want out of life? How can I integrate you in a relationship with my life? I think plants have that intelligence, if you want to call it that you do build relationships with them, and over the years, even from seed saving, like a previous generation of something you've grown, growing that over successive generations, it just builds this resilience and this, I don't know, this special connection that I can't necessarily put into words, but I think any gardener will tell you that they experience that as well. And that's why you get these just obsessive, plant people like Costa, who are just so enthusiastic about plants. It's because they're awesome. And yeah, so herbalism was really the gateway for me. And just learning about the history and the botanical sort of taxonomies and stuff. I just love nerding out on all of that. And I guess I still do. Everywhere I go, I'm just going like, what is that? What's the name of that? Where does it grow? What does it need? Who uses it? So I love it.
Awesome. So much so that you wrote and sing songs about carrots
and edible weeds. I've got a song about all the edible weeds. Well, not all, but some of the edible weeds. And I was a little bit hesitant to write it, actually, because I know, some people are a bit kind of like, oh, you don't know, you shouldn't just go out and eat weeds because what if you pick the wrong one? But I picked ones that, like, you couldn't possibly get confused with, or, hopefully if you couldn't get confused with, and put little diagrams in the album and stuff. But, it's just a little thing to encourage kids to go out and do wild foraging. There's stuff like dandelion and chickweed and, blackberries. I mean, who's gonna kind of get them confused with anything? But yeah, that was soon after our friends Annie Razor Rowland and Adam Grubb released a kids' book of like wild weed foraging, and they've written an entire field guide to weeds. So just even simple things like that, they don't have to be these special exotic herbs growing in your garden. Just weeds growing down the street can be something that's good for you, and just increases that diversity, that biodiversity in your diet.
Yeah, well said. And it's good for us, and it's good for the soil and the earth as well. So it's, once you step into this neat work, nerding out on plants, it's so encouraging to know that we have all these beautiful allies in the world that, we can befriend and that, provide for us, give us, everything that we need for existence, and breathe out the air that we breathe in. So incredible. And breathe in the air that we breathe out. What a relationship.
Yeah. I like that analogy of the ally and these friends, because again, I've got a song all about friends, but not human friends, and just trying to change that narrative of what is a friend. A friend can be a human, sure, but a friend can be a plant. A friend can be an animal. The whole world is our friend. And especially, to get kids thinking about that at a young age, it's like, well, let's just upload that as a given, that everything is our friend.
Yes.
And so plant friends, definitely, some of the best allies we've got.
All the way. All right, cool. Well, you've kind of answered all the questions. So, you've talked about how you've utilized plants to improve your health. Okay, I know this is a really hard one, but do you have an all-time favorite plant?
Ooh, favorites are hard. Everyone always asks me what my favorite vegetable is, because we play in a band called Formidable Vegetable, and I just automatically revert to cabbage, because cabbage could make kimchi, and
yes.
I'm just like, right, whatever. It's not my favorite, but it's awesome. But the thing about the thing that I love about that is that it kind of broadens that question into like, what's your favorite one thing? Because of course, permaculture is more than just about one thing. It's about many things, and so fermenting is like, that's like, yes, this is my favorite vegetable, but only because I can attract these millions of tiny microorganisms to it to increase the biodiversity and nutritional value that this one plant has. And so, yeah, that's my go-to answer. But really, I guess the actual answer would be, and it might sound like a bit of a cop out, but like all plants are my favorite plants. But
Yeah.
the reason the reason for that is that and I only just learnt this the other day when I listened to Dr. Christine Jones talk at a soil conference, and she's an amazing soil scientist, been working on, studying the soil food web for decades. And she was at this regenerative farming conference talking about soil and microbial life. And she basically explained to me that the reason that we want to eat a biodiverse range of plants is that not because of not for the plants' health benefits or the mineral content or flavonoids or whatever in the plant, but actually for their microbiome. And Microbiome is the title of our new album, and I've just been nerding out on microorganisms and gut flora and bacteria and fungi for ages. And I thought, well, why not just make an album on the microbiome?
Yes.
And what she said was that plants have their own distinct microbiomes, and every species, every variety of species has a distinct microbiome that actually, when it grows, starts out in the seed. A seed has its own microbiome. And I had no idea about this. It blew my mind. When you plant a seed, the microbiome from the seed inoculates the soil, and the biology in the soil suddenly increases to be, to include the microorganisms in that seed's microbiome, and it integrates with the microbiome and the soil biology that's already there. But the more species we plant and eat, the stronger that biodiversity is, and that's why farmers plant plants in succession. Because if you have a green manure crop of, say 5 different species, you're going to get the microbiome from all 5 of those species going into the soil, increasing the biodiversity and therefore the resilience of that soil. And then if you take them out before they've died off naturally and plant something else, that microbiome stays there, that it leaves an imprint. And then other plants can go in and actually take up that microbiome. So you're increasing the biodiversity of not just the soil, but the other plants that are growing in it. And she said that when it comes to diet, eating at least 30 species a day is the minimum amount that we need for optimal health. And it's not a quantity thing. It's not like you need to eat heaps of 30 species a day, but even just like one little bit of a different plant can give you billions or trillions of microorganisms that are specific to that plant. And they are food for our gut bacteria and our gut microbiome. So if you don't have the food that your gut bacteria need, they die off. So one of the things that's not talked about a lot in the biodiversity crisis is the biodiversity of our gut. And in the Western world, we eat approximately 5 species a day sometimes. People have a really low biodiversity in their diet. And so we're actually endangering a lot of the species that are endemic to our systems and essential for our health. So by eating, many different plants and many different species, it's not just for a mineral boost or an energy boost or the calories, but it's actually for the biodiversity of our bodies. And I was just like, whoa, that just changed everything. Because even if you're walking around and you're just plucking a leaf of this or a berry of that, it's like that one little bit can make all the difference. So yeah, diversity is what it's all about. It's my new jam.
Yes. And lots of jams, not just one type of jam.
But I still love cabbage.
Yes. Cook, grow more cabbage, make kimchi. Yeah, and I just got this beautiful picture then of the last thing you said about walking around and just picking the leaves and berries off things, like that beautiful vision of a food forest and a vegetable garden that we can just walk out to and just harvest what is what is flourishing and abundant. And yeah, just as a gardener, the more diversity you have, the better, integrated pest management you have, the healthier your system, the ecosystem you're creating. And it works both ways, like that, that age-old saying of we are not separate from and we're the same as nature. It's like this living embodied experience of knowing that because you're doing it.
And The other thing that Christine Jones mentioned was, and actually showed the evidence of, was a farmer who had been given this green manure mix of, say, 10 different species and wanted to know what they all were because he didn't know any of the species. Like, oh, well, I better figure out what it is I'm planting. So we got all the seeds, there's a range of legumes and grasses and forbs and herbs, and planted them each in individual pots to see what came up. And the plants came up, and in a separate pot, he just put a bunch of the mix in a slightly bigger pot all together. And what he noticed was that even though the seeds were all organic and, healthy seed from a good crop or whatever, they'd been grown together. And when he planted them individually, he noticed that the individual plants did really poorly. And so even though they were good seed, there was nothing wrong with it, and he had, good compost and good soil, they did really poorly, except in this pot where he planted them together. And the difference, like, you could see it. You could see these little spindly plants growing in a monoculture that just weren't thriving or doing well at all. And then you had this polyculture of just jungle, madness going off because the plants are sharing their microbiome and actually helping themselves to grow. So, like, helping each other to grow. So that was pretty incredible to see as well, that the actual evidence for diversity in action. And, that comes back to community again. You can do stuff by yourself and squirrel away at something, and it just doesn't feel like, it doesn't have the same effect as doing something in community together. There's some X factor that comes from participating in a society that's doing things together, on a local scale or whatever, that just feels right and just feels like it gives you vitality and it gives you health and it gives you motivation. Whereas if you just like by yourself or online or whatever, it doesn't have that same, you haven't got the pheromones or the microbiome sharing itself at a microscopic level or whatever. And there's just so much going on that we can't see. I think, it all comes down to just those in real life biodiverse exchanges that we need at every level.
All the levels, all that connection. Yeah, great. That was a lot. There's so much learning and everything that you've shared just then. And I feel like I missed out on geeking out on soil and plants with you all the other day. That sounded like it. Costa came along, I heard as well. It must have been a good experience with all the local farmers up here. And so cool that, this regenerative farming is really beginning to be adopted in our region here, because we're a food bowl. We send a lot of food around Australia and feed a lot of people, and the soil here is amazing, like this red soil. But it's, when you've got the permaculture lens and you see these monocultures and what was forest is now monoculture crops. It's very inspiring to see that Christine's up here sharing this and that farmers are really on board and, trialing these new things, but just kind of old ancient knowledge, but bringing it back into today's farming practices.
Yeah. It's about remembering, really, isn't it? Because it's nothing new.
Remembering. We're all waking up. Hey, can you share what's alive and thriving in your life right now?
Oh, well, clearly my gut microbiome is. It's practically ruling my life. But if you ask my partner, then you should tell you my gut microbiome is definitely alive and thriving. But that's another story. Look, I think this theme of diversity is really alive for me at the moment, and it's great because that's what I really missed about touring. I didn't tour for about 3 years because of the world shutting down and everything, but it's great now to be on the road again and sharing our music and songs with communities, with really broad range of communities that are all doing really cool stuff. And yeah, like you mentioned, seeing the regenerative farming movement just really going next level. I heard that it was a pretty conservative area where we were the other day, but that the fact that 150 farmers came out and paid to be at a conference about soil health and about, organic regenerative farming was amazing. And people were like, wow, I had no idea this was such a thing here. And so for the last few years, I've actually been living in a beautiful community in Southwest WA and really honing in on that localizing, like living living what we sing about. Basically, we're trying to build a straw bale house and grow a food forest and work with a community, intentional permaculture community, on self governance and just working together to create a common goal and a common vision, at least, for what we want to see in the world, just from the perspective of being at home. So, this is all of our homes. People have different needs and wants with a home, but we're trying to kind of pull the threads together to see well, what do we have in common? There's a lot of different perspectives, but there's a lot in common as well. And so on a local level, on our community, there's only 18 lots and about 20 adults and 25 kids. We've been actually just working with self-governance and coming up with working with these structures and models such as sociocracy for decision making, which works in a circular way, which works in kind of a network type way, rather than this top-down pyramid model of like, well, there's the boss or the CEO, and then there's like, ministers, and then there's the people down here somewhere, and those people at the top make the decisions. We've been working on this circular model based on sociocracy, which gives everyone the agency and the motivation to really step into their own power as decision makers, or or operations people, like doing stuff, getting stuff done without having to go through many layers of bureaucracy or this sort of top-down model. And that's one thing that, and it mimics natural systems, of course, because nature's not hierarchical. Nature is this complex network or web of resilient connections. And so it's been really cool to translate that to a people context rather than a plant context, for the purpose of regenerating a landscape. And so we've been nerding out on that, and living in intentional community is a whole experience in itself if you've ever done it. People are fascinating and difficult and changing, and I love it personally. And it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's difficult and it's unpredictable, but I think they're the skills that we need to work on. Actually, to be honest, I think working with people is a real kind of sore spot at the moment for some people, but it's an important spot to be focusing on. So to come back out into the world and come back to the East Coast and be on tour again, and to see other people doing that, I've kind of just been ignoring the rest of the world for a few years and focusing on our little community, but to see that that's been happening everywhere else as well, it's like, what? Like we're all focusing on this same stuff. Like, wow, this is really is a movement. It's part of something bigger than us, and that just gives me a lot of comfort as well. It steps out of that mentality of like, oh, I've got to get out and do my thing for the world because someone needs to save the world. It's like, no, actually, we can all do our little bits, and the world keeps going because everyone's doing their little bits. And I think to realize that, really just makes you see yourself as a part of a bigger whole, and gives you a little bit more comfort in the fact that, like, oh, things are probably going to be okay. If this is happening here and here and here and here, and I had nothing to do with that. I mean, maybe I did, like in a tiny microscopic kind of chaos theory type way, but really, like, things are happening and change is inevitable. And the changes that I've been seeing are mostly really positive. And, it also is about what you focus on as well. Sometimes I don't focus on the positive things and all I see is doom and gloom, but then I quickly change tack and I'm like, oh, actually, this is also happening. Like, that's not doom and gloom at all. That's always going to be there, but this is what I want to focus on.
Love it. Great message. Focus on the solutions. Over the years of permaculture evolving and becoming a global movement, and all of like the mycelium, all of the networks growing and expanding and the ripple effects happening, we've got these really practical techniques to regenerate the earth. And it's really exciting to see now, as you said, sociocracy and all the displacement that's happened over the last few years of people moving and housing crisis, and this problem of people needing or wanting to step into this vision of permaculture and harmony and sustainability, and the excitement of intentional communities it's nice to see the growth and the awareness of sociocracy, and that, the design of people and the invisible structures coming to the forefront. I did a beautiful interview with Erin Young, and we kind of dived into sociocracy, so that's a nice episode for people to listen to. But it's really cool to hear that, you're doing that as well, and, building this straw bale house, and, you're a musician singing about permaculture, but you're also applying all of this in all the different aspects of your life, which is, it's great for people to see how broad and how we can live this, we can apply it in so many different ways. Charlie, before we go, and I ask you to, I'd love for you to have an opportunity to, share something, or if you have anything that you wanted to share with our listeners before we say goodbye. But this is just a little sneaky extra question of mine, if you don't mind. I listened to a podcast a little while ago. I'm not sure where or what it was with, but you talked about, as a child, spending time in Indigenous or First Nations community. Could you share a little bit? I'm really interested in understanding that aspect of your life.
Yeah, well, that's great that you asked that, because I was just like, I've got to talk about that. So thanks for reading my mind.
Anytime.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Arnhem Land, on remote communities up there. My parents were working in communities. Dad's a teacher and mum's a nurse. So they actually met in a remote community about 300 k's north of Alice Springs. And then we moved up to the top end. And I spent my first few years on a tiny little community on an island off the top of Arnhem Land. And I think that was a really formative experience for me, because obviously it was my first few years of life. And my only memories are of just having complete freedom to roam with the local kids, and adults just weren't even present in my consciousness. I'm sure they were there, but I have this memory of just roaming the streets, with these kids, and we were just like a band, we were just like a mob. And my parents would just be like off at work or something, and would know exactly where I was, because the community was always looking out for the kids. And so they'd come home and be like, "Where's Charlie?" And they'd be like, "Oh, he's down at that mob's house." And so, they'd track me down to, a few houses down the street or something. But it was this really freeing way, from what I can remember, to live and to kind of be in community. And I also have a lot of memories about music, because obviously, Indigenous culture has traditionally used a lot of song and music in ways that are very different to a Western culture. And I think in this modern day context, a lot of that meaning's been lost. We commercialized or commodified music to a point where it's something we listen to kind of have a dance to, or just enjoy the sound of, or, and then we pay heaps to go and see a concert or buy people's music. But traditionally, a lot of cultures have actually had it as this intrinsic part of learning and educating and ceremony. And that was something that I got a sense of from a young age up there, because, people would be across the road from our house singing into the night. And it was like ceremonial song. There'd be songmen singing these ancient songs for ceremony, or there'd be a funeral and people would sing, and that people were always singing. And it wasn't in a performative way, but it was in this just deeply embedded way that is actually like, that's what keeps culture going. And people might not be aware, but like this country that we call Australia is an intricate network of song lines, and people have walked across, back and forth across the entire continent, singing their knowledge into the landscape for thousands and thousands of years. And it's way more than just a tokenistic or symbolic thing. It's actually embedding knowledge into the landscape. I've read an amazing book by a woman called Lynn Kelly, called The Memory Code, and later one called Songlines that she co-wrote with Margot Neal, who's an Indigenous woman from Melbourne. And it's about how ancient cultures from all over the world, not just Australia, but even my ancestors in England or Scotland, used this technique of music and song embedded in the landscape to actually encode knowledge. And that's sort of that started to emerge when I was doing permaculture. It was like we're learning about pattern languages and traditional ways of knowing, and music came up as one of these techniques for remembering and for propagating culture. And I thought, oh, hang on, maybe we could do this for permaculture. And that's what inspired the songs, was this idea that music could be used for more than just entertainment, which is all I'd experienced up until that point. I was like, well, I'm in a band, I'm playing music, it's great fun. There's got to be more to it than this. And that was a key that I took home from my permaculture course, was that, wow, I can actually use the skills that I have to be a proponent of culture and create, help to create a regenerative culture. Again, it comes back to remembering, because my ancestors did this, people in this country did this and still do it today. But it's just sort of something that is so deeply embedded in us. Our brains are literally wired to recognize patterns and remember them, rather than data and text, which is sort of what our entire Western education system is based on. So I was like, well, screw that. I'm just going to write some songs, and hopefully it helps me to remember the permaculture principles, and it might help some other people do it too. So, I don't know if that was a direct result of having grown up in Indigenous communities, but it definitely had some roots to that. And I think, the elephant in the room is that we need to listen and respect the old cultures of this country as much as possible, because there is still so much knowledge embedded in the landscape and in the people. And I think the beauty of permaculture, permaculture's critiqued some of the time for being cultural appropriation, and the fact that it's using Indigenous knowledge, or, promoting knowledge that maybe some from this culture and some from that culture. And it does, stand on the shoulders of giants in that respect, in that it references cultures from all over the world and traditional people who've had this knowledge for decades. But I think it's more of a bridge to actually help those of us who've been disconnected from that to remember the ways of knowing that humans have had for millennia, as a way to come back to a more ecological way of living. And so I don't see it as cultural appropriation, unless someone's just in it for the money and like, I'm going to create a permaculture empire and make millions of dollars and rip off all this knowledge and sell it. I think that's the difference. But a friend of ours who is a Maori person said that for them to communicate their knowledge systems, people would need to be initiated into the culture. They'd need to have a deep understanding of all the stories and songs and that entire context. And that'd be really difficult to communicate for a person who's not from that lineage. But the beauty of permaculture is that it kind of encapsulates those key parts of different traditional cultures and encodes it in a way that people who might not understand that or might not come from that context can start to understand. And I see the trajectory being as a way for us to actually build connections with the cultures that still exist in this country and in any country, rather than a way to kind of take away from those cultures. It's a way of coming back. So I think first and foremost, respecting the Indigenous cultures that are here and listening, because there's so much knowledge that I don't understand, and a lot of people in this country don't understand, that we really could use, listening to and understanding in this time. So, I guess that's where I'm at with it at the moment, and it's been a beautiful journey so far.
Yeah, I'm going to read those books. I'm actually reading Finding the Heart of the Nation by Thomas Mayer at the moment. And I'll put the links into this, into the show notes so people can connect. But I love what you say there, and I hope that this is an opportunity for, the voice to be enshrined in the Constitution. I think this year could be a really big year for this opportunity to really listen and bridge those gaps, and to, all of that good stuff.
Definitely. Totally. And as well as that, the beautiful thing that's been happening is that voice is already being enshrined at a local level. And just even since that discussion started happening, whether you trust the government and the bureaucratic systems to deliver on what they say is one thing, but the fact is communities have responded, and the amount of recognition and listening and deep listening and truth telling that's that's coming to the fore now is just indicative of like where people are at. Like, yes, like we're ready. You know, we've got to take this difficult journey to do this, and people are just owning it and stepping up, and communities are making it happen regardless of the government. So yes, definitely the voice and the constitution, and that's a stepping stone, but there's so many other stepping stones as well. So it's great to see it happening from all angles.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate all of your time. It's been a blast spending time with you whilst you've been in Far North Queensland. Anything that you would like to say to close off today's interview?
Oh, look, I reckon just go and plant something. I find that whenever I come to a new place, you know, it's always such a kind of disruption to life and the flow. Is like, I'm leaving home. Where am I? I'm in the air. Oh, and I'm now in a new place. The first thing I do, just instinctively, is to like find some seed or some plant and just start propagating it and just like guerrilla planting. I was in Melbourne once and I just found that I had this insatiable urge to go and plant a tree. So I went out and bought an olive tree and I planted it at a bus stop in the middle of Melbourne. And it was there for 4 years. And it grew and grew and grew. And then one day, it wasn't there anymore, but that was sad. But yeah, boo. Planting something, get out, get your hands in the soil, get that biodiverse microbiome all over you, and start just listening to the hidden side of nature that, you know, that we maybe just are still learning about.
Yes. And in terms of your Patreon and your new album Microbiome, anything to share there for ways people can connect with you?
Yeah, look, we need all the support we can get, and we really do get a lot of support. But if you want to support us, head to patreon.com/growdoit. Growdoit is our educational kind of enterprise, bringing permaculture educational resources to young people and kids, but also, you know, community and through Formidable Vegetable. So yeah, you can listen to our music on our website, formidablevegetable.com. But yeah, if you can support on Patreon, it's just a couple of bucks a month or whatever you can manage. It helps keep us going and just bringing this work into the world. So yeah, really appreciate that as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and from all of our Nature Kids families who listen into your music. We teach the principles, and I've got a link that sends people straight to your music, and we dance. We have a lot of gatherings where we dance to your music. So your work has definitely inspired me and played a big part in the work that I do in permaculture, and I'm forever grateful. So thank you so much for your time, Charlie.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
The Elder Tree is a not-for-profit organisation that is in the beginning stages of creating a grassroots herbal education centre and healing sanctuary in the Atherton Tablelands of Far North Queensland. To find out more, go to theeldertree.org and follow the journey on Instagram and Facebook. You can also donate to the Elder Tree via our podcast channel on Anchor or via the website. If you like the episode, we'd love you to subscribe. And if you know who we should interview next, drop us a line. See you next month, and in the meantime, may you grow them to know them and be blessed with good health and many plants.